Young and unassuming, Harry is a great example of the next wave of physiotherapists who are hardworking, creative, and blending clinical experience with research and education. Let's find out some more. It's my pleasure today on Physio+10 to welcome Harry Truong to our conversation. Harry, I'd like to get these things kicking off with why was it you became so enamored to study physiotherapy?
Yeah, I reckon, to be honest, Doug, like growing up, I liked all sort of sports. Played a little bit of sport in primary school, but to be honest, sort of like going through high school, physio didn't sort of come into my mind until probably later. Until I read what was called the SATAC guide, and there was a description on what the physios do, and to be honest, it sounded actually pretty cool, and so that's what sort of made me get into it. So it was a bit of a it's not like I had a burning desire to be a physio. It was more so where was I going to go sort of after high school, and
And were there other options that you were considering, or was it just physio and that was it?
Yeah, I think I was probably always aiming towards the health sort of world. I know I had dentistry on the list there. I had dentistry on the list, pharmacy on the list. And I'll be honest, it was almost one of those where the back end of it was almost like you sort of just threw one on top of the list, and you hope that you sort of get in, really. So that's how that story sort of came about.
So if you could give us a bit of background then with your schooling, like you said SATA, so I'm guessing that's South Australia, something or other, is it?
Yeah. So I grew up in Adelaide. So I grew up in Adelaide here, and so I went to primary school here, standard sort of life, high school. So I went to a Catholic primary school, then I went to a public high school, Adelaide High here. Managed to do okay in sort of year 12, and then and that's how it sort of came about. In terms of from a schooling sort of background, so I always grew up in Adelaide and trained in Adelaide. So,
and mum or dad or anyone else particularly a mentor in regards to the health field, like anyone else in that sphere?
No, actually, so my mum is my mum works, so growing up she worked sort of like 2 or 3 jobs. So she was a home sewing machinist, and then she also worked at a local sort of IGA. My dad worked at the Australia Post in sort of mail sorting. So I'm the only one in health I think in my whole sort of family and sort of timeline and all that. I think, or not timeline, but probably my sort of mum side and dad side. So.
And where do you fall in are you the icebreaker, or are you the middle kid, or are you the one that gets pampered because you're the last one?
No, I'm probably the black sheep. Everyone would say I'm probably the black sheep of the family. So I'm in the middle. I'm one of 3. So, and middle child.
And what your bros and your sisters do? What were they involved in?
Yeah, so my older brother, he's in between jobs, but he's more so in the sort of the biomedical engineering sort of field. And my younger sister, she's a qualified teacher majoring in sort of English and English as a second language. And it's funny because they're the very creative. They can draw, they can paint, they can do all the artistic sort of things, and I'm far from that, actually. So. Yeah.
Okay, so
definitely black sheep.
Wow, we can't have all these great skills and qualities, can we? Did you you said you grew up in Adelaide? Did you then decide to just continue that training in Adelaide? You didn't look at moving interstate for your physiotherapy degree?
Yeah, I think that's where my time was probably pretty boring. I think I never really sort of considered it. Sort of growing up, pretty really close knit sort of family, and so there was never a decision to sort of want to go sort of interstate from year 12 going into sort of uni. At that time, University of South Australia was the only uni offering physiotherapy at that time. Now there's 2 other Flinders University and Adelaide University, which now offer sort of an undergraduate program, but in physio. But at that point, it was just UniSA. So so it wasn't really. I was essentially more so just sort of following whichever course I sort of got accepted in. So.
And what do you remember most about your university experience? Like, what were the highlights for you?
Yeah, university was fun. I think as a young sort of 17, 18-year-old, it was good, different. Obviously getting used to sort of the adult learning sort of side of things. Looking back, you always think like I could have probably taken university a little bit more seriously in the early days, like in the earlier years. But I think it was one of those things for me that, to be honest, it probably just grew on me as the years went on, though. Like when it went into your third and fourth years in the program, where I start to sort of tell myself, oh yeah, like it's not bad, it's good, like I can do this. So yeah.
Were there any aspects you found particularly challenging?
I guess it was moving from that didactic type of learning in high school. Teachers sort of tell you what to do, what to read, and stuff like that. Whereas in university, I guess it was more self-driven. Due dates are there, and if you don't meet it, it's on you. So I guess it was taking that responsibility on yourself to really get the work done and understand it yourself to put it all together. So.
I found that kind of challenging in a way because, and just talking with Sean O'Leary, who also mentions this transition from rote learning, basically, I guess, up to first year, there was still a lot of information we were being delivered on a platter saying, just, learn this. And then come around second year and third year, it starts to transition towards more like a clinical reasoning, like you got the information, but how are you going to apply it? And I remember that transition as being pretty difficult because I was very much a rote learner and almost a mind map person, putting things together in that sort of process. And then having to apply it in a situation where patients in front of you, I found that kind of quite a change, a transition. And I found that sort of difficult. How'd you go with that?
Yeah, and I was probably the same too, because going from year 12 where I studied sort of like your maths 1, maths 2, chemistry, physics, and all that, like a lot of those sort of subjects, and then moving into moving into uni where it's a bit more clinical reasoning, exploratory, learning to communicate. And then once I got into the whole sort of clinical placement side of things, it wasn't really just what you knew as well. It was how, it was all the other soft skills and, being able to understand, talk to someone, understand them. Yeah, sort of, I guess, changed the whole game of just knowing just the theory and things you could regurgitate, remembering nerves or muscles or whatnot. So that was a big change and big learning sort of curve for me throughout the degree, and that was the undergraduate degree. So
I like the use of the soft skills. That's something I'd never really considered until I got out into private practice, actually, and thought I've got to understand people a lot better. It's not just their foot being the problem; it's the person that's attached to the foot, and learning to read people, I guess, and understand how to communicate the information that they sort of required.
Yeah, definitely. So.
All right, so we've hit the undergraduate. You've done that. You've completed it. I guess you're pretty happy. Yep. What do you sort of remember most about that sort of first couple of weeks on graduating? Like some people said it's a paycheck. Some have said it's the relief and the status of becoming a physio. What did it mean the most for you becoming a physio?
Yeah, I think the first thing was just like completing the degree. Like it was never out of sight, but it was always just one of the things. Once you get you're slugging through the undergraduate program, and then when you get to the end, you're like, oh my god, like I'm finished. I finished. I'm now a physio, and like it is that sense of disbelief a little bit, where you're almost like, sometimes you think, oh my god, like the next time I'm seeing someone, they're paying me for what I'm about to do, and I don't know if I know what I'm I don't even know what I'm doing. Like,
did you go to private practice, or did you go into a hospital situation?
So I went straight into private practice. I thought, because the back end of the undergraduate degree, funnily enough, I didn't think I was the strongest musculoskeletal sort of student going around in the undergraduate, and I'll openly, happily sort of admit that. And then it wasn't until fourth year where I thought, oh yeah, like that was like musculoskeletal was enjoyable and fun, and I felt I had some sort of grasp on it. And I thought I didn't want to sort of waste time sort of exploring sort of other options. So I thought I wanted to get it straight into private practice. So
I just
managed to
remember
jag a
rocking
job
on.
there.
My first job was Launceston General Hospital, and I just remember rocking on the orthopedic ward and literally transitioning, traveling across from Perth to there and unpacking the bag and then rocking up to work on Monday and thinking, literally Friday I was a student and Monday I'm being paid to manage this orthopedic ward. And I thought, oh, this is not a good idea.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really funny because like even during study and during like your clinical placement, I'm sort of sometimes I'm sometimes always wanting the educator to not watch me, and then when I was out in private practice with the first one or two, the first few patients, I'm like, I actually wished I had the supervisor watching me. Like, yeah, so it's definitely a bit of a change, like in terms of becoming that sort of autonomous sort of practititioner as well. So
How
yeah.
did your career develop then over those first few years?
Yeah, so I managed to jag a job in private practice where there was a specialist musculoskeletal physiotherapist there, Peter Roberts. So he led a big team where there was quite a few sort of senior physios who were titled physios as well. And so I guess, when I went in there with an open mind in terms of I was just willing to learn, listen, sort of, yeah, be a sponge really and sort of take it all on and, be open to sort of feedback as well. And so those first few years was a huge learning curve because of the mentoring that was provided, the support that I had from the seniors. Yeah, and it really inspired me along the sort of private practice sort of pathway, which was really, really good actually. So yeah. So,
Were there particular people that you felt sort of guided you or acted as mentors other than Peter, or was Peter the person?
yeah, definitely in the within those first 3 or 4 years, Peter was probably the biggest driving influence on my career in terms of one, just his passion for for the profession and for his patients. I guess and driving that sort of patient-centered care, evidence-based informed practice. And all of that was really sort of inspiring to sort of see, like even someone, had been a senior, had owned his clinic and was still at that point where he still wanted to help, and he was more than happy to help and teach and everything. So that was really, really inspiring. Yeah, and a lot of the other seniors I have to give credit to as well. There'd be times where, wouldn't know what I'm doing. I'd run into one of their officers, knock on the door. Hey, what do you reckon? Can you have a look? Can you double check and stuff? So yeah, all of those, and I still remember all of those little interactions that I've had with all of them. And it's all sort of helped me along the journey, sort of ticking along. So
What sort of, like you talk about interactions, if you were going to advise someone who's going to mentor a new graduate, what do you reckon is the best way for that transfer of information to occur from your experience?
yeah, I think it's got to come from a place where it's not only just from a mentoring perspective as a physio and knowledge base. I think I also think it's also important to sort of know the individual and the person and how they respond as well. And so everyone learns differently, everyone takes feedback differently, and so I think, as a mentor as well, I think that's really important to sort of gauge, like, how does this person learn best, and your language and communication in explaining something to someone, I think is probably one of the most important things as well. So yeah. So I think it's finding a mentor that understands you, not only from me giving you knowledge sort of level, but I think it's more so understand what's their background, what do they understand what's their understanding. So getting to know them, I think.
At this stage, what sort of jobs or clinical experiences were you particularly seeking? You sound like you'd already gone down that musculoskeletal pathway. You weren't being diverted from that. But were there particular jobs or experiences that you were chasing?
No, so at that point, I always had sort of like watching the seniors within the clinic, watching Peter and stuff, that started to sort of light a fire in terms of, I guess, me aspiring to want to be a senior physio who could mentor and guide others, and provide provide to others what I was fortunately sort of given as well. Mind you, you do a lot of the hard work yourself in terms of you're gone away home, you're reading, you're opening up textbooks, you're opening up uni resources, more journal articles, and you're reading and stuff as well. So, and that's sort of what lit it a bit. I had a bit of an interest into sports as well. And so I was always, I guess it was sort of a foot in both sort of camps a little bit. Yeah. So helping out at amateur sports, but mainly doing the private practice sort of stuff. And then, yeah, so that was mainly the first sort of 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years first. So.
And then what sort of progressed on from there?
Yeah, and that was when then I decided time frame wise and life wise and stuff. I bit the bullet and enrolled into the postgraduate sort of masters in musculoskeletal and sports, and obviously that was then it was a dual masters in musculoskeletal and sports, and that program was run by Mary McGarry and Mark Jones, and so they ran a very from what I knew, it was a prestigious sort of postgraduate program, and I was really excited. And a lot of the seniors in the clinic had recommended me to do it too. And so, yeah, so all those little things had sort of gotten me to a point where I was like, well, I'll bite the bullet and go do it full time. So
again, did you look around about leaving the state? Did you sort of have that urge now that you've been working for a few years to maybe try a different city or a different group of clinicians?
Yeah, again, funnily enough, Doug, no, I probably had my blinkers on. I reckon I was probably young and stupid. I'll be honest. I didn't really think about it because I think a lot of the seniors who had done it had gone through the program and they had recommended it. And yeah, like when I look back, like even on reflection now, I was like, yeah, why didn't I consider it? Yeah, and I never thought past it really. So yeah, which then sort of came about in full circle later down the track. So yeah, until more recently. So which is funny. So yeah, so I ended up doing the postgraduate masters in 2011, and I did that full time, and that was probably a fantastic year. I think just from all sort of perspectives. I think it completely changed my way of how I practiced, how I thought, what you thought you knew, you probably didn't know, and what you knew, what you didn't know, you start to get some sort of grey idea about what might be going on. So yeah, so that was massive learning curve, very stressful, but 100% worthwhile. And I'll always be thankful for all that learning that under Mark and Mary with all that as well. So
it was a dual program. Did you get the itch to maybe go down the sports pathway as opposed to the Musk? I mean, we know what you did, but was there a reason or a turning point for you to decide one way or the other?
Yeah, so I ended up doing it because it was a combined sports and Musk in the one full year, and so at that point you couldn't pick whether you just from what I knew, I just enrolled for the full program, and so I ended up sort of doing it. It wasn't until after, so once I had finished and become sort of titled musculoskeletal in sports, it was at that point where I was like, oh, okay, like where could I take the musculoskeletal sort of work side of things, or where could I take the sports side of things? So yeah, so after the masters, I then found another clinic that was working, and they had probably a few more sporting elite sort of sporting contacts and world, so they were a bit more in the soccer side of things. So yeah, so then I ended up there, which I am now at this clinic, Pro Healthcare. So
okay, again, I guess the question I was maybe asking there is, why didn't you go down the sports pathway? Because we're about to step off and sort of ask you about specialization, but you decided to do that in Musk and not sports.
Yeah, because then after the masters, I was asked, or I had an opportunity to be able to start casually clinical educating at the university. So I was then essentially a part-time sort of working in the private practice and then working as a clinical educator in their musculoskeletal program. And so while I was doing all that, I was also doing a little bit of sports work. And then from when I sort of finished up with the sports work in about 2016, I guess at that point I'd sort of thought to myself, well, which sort of pathway am I going to go down? Am I going to go down a musculoskeletal world or a sports world? And I thought to myself, I really enjoyed the teaching aspect side of things, and I felt I'd probably had some value in doing in moving down more so a musculoskeletal pathway in terms of me thinking longer term with my career.
Yeah. Okay. So it was because of that tutoring type process that's probably what pushed you a little bit down the MUS pathway.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, because it was when I then started getting my foot into the university sort of system and the teaching side of things. Obviously with a background in sports, but then my stronger interest and probably passion was more so in the musculoskeletal side of things.
Yeah. And you have actually now completed your specialization in musculoskeletal physiotherapy. Why did you decide to embark upon this tumultuous course?
yeah. Sometimes I ask myself that, Doug. No, I guess it was an opportunity to sort of just challenge myself, and I think it was one of those things where, you know, sometimes when you go into private practice, you're seeing patients, you're the senior sort of physio there, you're doing a bit of mentoring, but then, you know, there's almost that sort of ceiling effect of like, where else is there to go within a private sort of practice world? And obviously if you're seeing patients day to day, you know, I guess your roles can sometimes get monotonous, or you can get lazy and stuff. And so for me, it was more so getting to that point where I had an itch that I wanted to sort of scratch in terms of being able to challenge myself. And so it sort of came about where I actually had coffee and lunch with Mary and Peter, and just had a chat, just to sort of I guess get their advice and opinion and stuff. But, you know, and they were sort of big influences in you know, that helped sort of make my decision go towards a specialization pathway. And so they were already big influences in my career, you know, along with Mark Jones. And then once they sort of talked about it, it was something that I thought, well, let's, again, sort of like the masters, bite the bullet and let's get into it and see how it goes.
So ballpark, we're talking about 10 years after you'd done your postgrad masters?
Yeah, it was about 8 years. Yeah, 8 to 9 years after postgrad masters. So,
and on reflection, do you think there's an ideal time frame between like one and then moving on to the next?
Yeah, I guess it would be different courses for different horses. But obviously I do think, yeah, I think I would think it's that point where if you're ever feeling like within your practice that you're either one, not enjoying, or you're feeling like you're doing the same thing, or you're feeling like you're somewhat lazy, or you feel like there's an itch to do, I think that's the point where you're probably it's probably worthwhile exploring. And I think that itch for me came a bit later. So yeah.
Well, I think that's a recognition that it's time to move on. And as you say, it's probably one of those personal decisions that varies from person to person, but it's a recognition that it's going to push you, isn't it? It does push you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So fortunate that I still got a little bit of hair left.
So what would you say is the level of commitment that's required? Because you've recently gone through with the specialization. Like if somebody sits down now with you with a coffee or a chamomile tea, probably if they're going to embark upon it, what are you going to sort of recommend to them?
Yeah, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. I guess in terms of the commitment, if you can, I guess if you can commit, a couple hours a night, weekends, you sort of balance it out. But then in saying that, it is a roller coaster. Like, I guess there's periods where it might be a little bit quieter, but then there's significant periods where it's really intense, and you've got to really knuckle down and really really work on it and do lots of readings and everything. It is one of the things that sort of it's always in the back of your mind, and so I guess you have to be, self-driven, self-motivated, and organized as well, and be prepared to be super organized, to help you sort of get through all that.
What did you find then was challenging about the process, particularly for you?
Yeah, I guess the challenges come from a lot of aspects. I guess it's being prepared to question what you thought you knew, and also be prepared to look at yourself, from an outside perspective, to really reflect on sort of how you practiced as well. And so, I mean, for me, it was a big learning curve, because all of my training was done in South Australia and in Adelaide, and so, I sort of forced myself to go interstate and travel, and look towards learning off different specialists in different states who had trained differently. And within my cohort, I had like Matthew Smith, who's just recently gone through in Queensland, Stacey Kubert, and Ivan Lynn in Perth, and guys, and to learn off those guys as well. And they all came from different, we all came from different backgrounds with different strengths and stuff. And so it was, that learning process of questioning and being reflective and learning, thinking about your own abilities and your knowledge, and then sort of, getting to a point where it's sort of a case of not knowing and knowing what you didn't know or what you did know. So, and so that's challenging in itself. So,
I just wrote a little article for AAP education members called 50 Shades of Grey, and it was really I've never read the book nor seen the movie, but I don't know, I heard the title again, and I thought, that's physiotherapy. We live in this syndrome of T4 syndrome, rotator cuff pain syndrome, fibromyalgia syndrome, myofascial pain, all these syndromes where there's no specific diagnosis, and we really have to listen to the patient and get their story, meet them in their journey, listen to their clinical history as well, and then try and work out in this big spectrum of grey maybes and possibilities where we're going to meet them and actually start helping them. And I think that's what the challenge is for us often, is that we don't have an easy diagnostic pathway. It really is this person and their problem, and then meeting them at that point and then guiding them through the process. And that's kind of why I like the 50 Shades of Grey, because I thought, well, it's got nothing to do with the story, but it does capture where we sit often. And as you say, the more we learn, the greyer it gets.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably more than 50 Shades of Grey as well. And, it's sort of that, what is it, the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it? Like you realize you don't know what you don't know, and there's so much out there. And so the more you know, the more you realize you don't actually know.
That's true.
Well. So, yeah.
Now, one of your mentors for the specialisation was Mary McGarry, and we had a chat on Physio+10 with Mary, who's obviously done specialisation in sports and Musk. Do you have any plans on doing another area of specialisation?
Now, Mary's an absolute legend. Legend. I'll probably most likely won't, I reckon. I'll probably leave that to Mary, I reckon. So
I reckon she's going to go down in history as the only person that's done both.
Yeah, I might hold on to my hair, I reckon. So
now, I found I think it was a Facebook post, and it was something like Sam Offord was saying, Harry Truong is a physio to see for this one specialist MSK physio, and rumour has it that if he was forced to pick it, the left side is his favourite. What's the story about the left side?
No, so Sam Offord is a mate of mine. He's a sports physio. He's a Commonwealth Games gold medalist, actually, in gymnasts. And
Wow.
he's definitely just taking the mickey out of me. So yeah, and I guess it's funny because I had a coffee with him and recently, and it's essentially just social media can get a bit serious at times, and he's a legend of a bloke, and he's just got a good sense of humor. So yeah, taking the mickey out of me. So no bias on sides, Doug.
Okay. As a
Yeah.
physio, what's your number one goal with most patients?
Yeah, I think it's just I think enjoying what I do, and if I enjoy what I do, it will probably reflect in what I can provide for the patient. And it's in the end, we're there to help the patients. Either help patients or as a teaching academic, we're there to help students. And I guess we want to be able, or we should be able to convey information in a way that helps them understand the journey that they're on as well. So that's probably my sort of message.
Okay. And thinking back over the last couple of weeks of patients, do
Yeah,
you find there's a common bit of advice that you seem to be giving patients?
yeah. It's probably not one common piece of advice. It's probably, I guess, it's probably the concept of just understanding the problem, getting the patient to understand the problem is probably, I probably think, one of the most important things to helping them on their journey. Yeah, as opposed to one piece of advice. So I
So what
think
do you
it's,
mean by
yeah.
that? Like, can you give me an example?
Yeah, and I guess it's like putting into context, to the individual, if they understand what may be contributing to their symptoms, or yeah, or what might be happening, or what might be contributing or causing their symptoms as well. So sometimes it's I guess operating as more so as a second opinion. It's sometimes how the information is conveyed or communicated to them, for them to understand, for them to walk away and sort of say, that makes sense. I understand, like, this is what could be going on, and this is the pathway that I might need to take to help.
So you're trying to enlighten them about possible contributing factors that they maybe not have been aware of till they saw you?
Yeah, yeah, and I guess it all sort of depends on per patient, isn't it? Like, I guess it all, in the end, it all sort of depends, and so I think with every patient, it's going to be different, and so I think that's where, it's not really sort of this one piece of advice that I would give them, or anything. So yeah, it's trying to, I guess, like you said, Doug, like, you sort of meet them at their story and at their point in time and their journey to be able to help them. So
Okay. And
yeah,
as a physiotherapist, what would you say has been your hardest lesson to learn so far?
I think it's okay to not know everything, and not have the answer to everything. I think it's important that we we be reflective in what we do and what we say, and in the end, we're dealing with the human body, and as you said, there's lots of gray. Not everything is black and white, and so yeah, what you read in the textbook and what you read in picture, what you see in pictures and diagrams, it all looks nice and fancy and black and white and straightforward, but then you're sitting there with a patient and there's whole heaps of gray, and that journey turns left, right, takes a U-turn, goes up and down, and then moves forward, and to then move backwards as well. So yeah, so that's probably the thing. So
And what would you say for you? How would you describe your current week, like physio wise? What are you immersed in?
yeah, so at the moment, I'm a part-time lecturer in musculoskeletal physiotherapy at UniSA. So I teach into the undergraduate and postgraduate program. So that probably takes up 70 to 80% of my week. And I'm still part-time consulting at a private practice. So I probably do about 15, 16 hours there. And then I also and my role there also sort of involves sort of mentoring the new grads and recent grads as well.
How much preparation is involved in your sort of 70 to 80% of undergraduate, postgraduate presentation?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it comes in waves as well. I guess, when you're teaching and lecturing, at the uni, it's always trying to keep up to date in terms of the content that you're teaching, or updating what you or had been previously taught, and trying to keep it all. And then also being nowadays, obviously with COVID as well, looking at more being exploratory with your teaching approaches and teaching methods too, moving what content can sort of move to online, so using different mediums to be able to teach concepts as well. So quite a bit, I would like to say. But it comes in waves. So
was there a point so far? I mean, you've had a lot of challenges, and they're self-imposed challenges with regards to your profession. Was there a time when you decided you just didn't want to be a physio?
That's a great question, Doug. No, it's not that I never wanted to quit the profession. But like any job, there was periods where like you sort of notice, it's not an easy job, particularly in sort of private practice, like you do work hard, it's, you're mentally, it's mentally taxing, you're always operating, at a high level, like clinical reasoning, you're balancing knowledge with, balancing your communication and soft skills, with patients. But so never really wanted to quit the profession. But I guess it was also those moments where, you might have your odd grumble here and there, but then it's, I guess, coming back to just being grateful for what you had, sort of glass half empty, glass half full actually, then more than, sort of glass half empty. And so, and I think that's where, and it was probably those times when you start looking at your options to see whether you can further develop your skills, and you go to challenge yourself, and you further your skill set and knowledge, and stepping out of your comfort zone to look to get to where you want to go. So
you were saying you're sort of about 70-80% in the university environment, and sort of say 20% in private practice.
Yep.
Is that where you're wanting to stay? Is that the sort of balance that you feel is right for you?
Yeah, at the moment, again, sort of, looking at, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm really passionate about the teaching side of things. But I also feel it's important, to also still be practicing. And I think that's where at the moment I've got a fair balance in terms of, both hands and both pies, really. And I'm really enjoying both. And I think one complements, they both complement each other. So, yeah.
And whilst you're in the university environment, are you also involved in research?
Yeah, so not at the moment. It's probably something that I'll have in the back of my mind, and it's probably something I'll eventually look towards potentially dabbling into in the future as well. So, just finished specialization, so sort of just want to ease up a little bit before I embark on anything else, before I lose more hair or anything.
So, and professionally, what sort of 3 things have stood out for you so far in your career?
Yeah, I think 3 things. Yeah, well, completing the undergraduate degree, getting the first job, and it was funny. Like I always remember the first time when I got the gig, and I got your physiotherapist name badge. That was probably a big big thing that stood out. Just having my name there, and then having the word physio underneath, like I couldn't believe it. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Completing the masters was definitely a massive thing. Passing specialization obviously was huge. Probably the biggest actually. And then within the career, I managed to work with Adelaide United for 3 seasons when they won the championship double in 2016. That was also a big thing as well. So yeah, I think I named 4, but yeah.
We'll let that slide.
Specialization probably stands out the biggest, Doug, I think, for me. So yeah.
And I think that, I guess, the more intensity, the bigger the commitment, the bigger the outcome or the thrill when it's completed, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you're sort of tired by the end of it, but yeah, for me it was couldn't believe you did. You know what I mean? It almost brought back the undergraduate feeling again, like, oh my God, like I've managed to pass it. So yeah.
New badge, new name tag.
Nah, no badge actually. So I haven't won. No, I usually operate without a badge nowadays. So probably still got the badge somewhere, like my first job badge. So, so probably got it somewhere. But
As far as giving advice goes, if you could jump back into a TARDIS and head back to when you were first about to graduate as a physiotherapist, what sort of 3 bits of advice would you like to give yourself?
yeah, again, I think I meant like, yeah, it's okay to not know everything, and you never will, and it's okay. Like I think that's probably the biggest thing. Like the other thing would be just be open and reflective in what you do and who you are. Not, I guess, not only as a physio but as a person, and probably the other thing is just you can't go wrong if you focus on the patient. Sometimes I would think physios where we're so focused on what, like, oh, we need to do, I need to do this or I need to do that or something. But in the end, I think if you focus on the patient, you can't go wrong. And I was told that, or advised that, by a couple of wiser heads who you've previously podcasted. So Pat, Trot, and Mary. So yeah. And then in the end, I think it's also just like enjoy your work. Like yeah, because then if you enjoy your work, it's all okay. Life's okay. So
Very, very wise. I'm surprised your hair's not grey, Harry.
yeah.
Might be falling out, but it's not grey yet.
Yeah, I just dyed it this morning actually. So no.
And then looking forward, like next 5 years, where would you like to see our profession going? You're sort of one of the younger cadre coming through. You've done your masters and your specialisation, and you're feet in both private practice and university. Where do you sort of want our profession to go over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot. Yeah, again, yeah, like I would like to consider myself slightly sort of young still, so which is good. So, but I think we're in a good spot because I think we're a profession where we have a balance between manual therapy, exercise, diagnosis, rehab, and then you cap that off with with our ability to listen, our ability to listen, communicate, on top of that, with the broader sort of clinical reasoning sort of stuff as well. So I think we're in a good spot. I think it's just a matter of driving our profession and knowing and seeing what our strengths are, but also be open and reflective to what we know and what we don't know as well. I think that being like that will hold us in good stead moving forwards. So yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, Harry, very much for joining us on Physio+10 today. It's been really a joy to hear your story and also know the young guys are losing their hair and the stresses of the of the specialisation process. It's good to know that that's still part of the process. But yeah, look, absolute joy having you on board. And thank you very much for sharing your journey with us on Physio+10 today.
Thanks, Doug. And yeah, really humbled and thankful for the opportunity to chat with you. And what you're doing is great. And I think it's an amazing project that you're doing. So good job.
Thank you.